Welcome to Maritime Punk. This week I'm here with Jon Glen from Another Joe. So first of all, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. So still keeping busy. I was so excited when I saw that latest album come out. But before we get to that, I want to take people back to the beginning because when I was a teenager, Another Joe, Gob, there were so many good Canadian bands coming out of the BC area, DBS. So tell me a bit about that scene and just kind of how it exploded out of nowhere.
Yeah, in the '90s, I did an interview for a, a magazine here, and we were talking about the '90s and music in general. And you know, at that time, I mean, the punk rock bands were amazing. I mean, just hands down, awesome bands. But across the board, I thought in the '90s, rock music and punk rock music across the country in Canada was just fantastic. You would have a hard time in the Vancouver music scene, which was just completely thriving, punk or rock or whatever, jazz or anything, blues. Um, and I lived in downtown Vancouver at that time, and I could go out 7 days a week, any night, and pick almost any bar to go walk into, and that had a live band, and you were going to run into an amazing band. And it didn't matter what genre they were; it didn't make any difference. They were just awesome. But and then of course the scene that I kind of belonged to, which was the punk rock scene, was massive. Meaning there were so many great young bands that were just so excited to play music, and they were just all good. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, just all the bands were just really good. And it was, I mean, I kind of, as I'm sure we'll get to one point, like I sort of vacated the music scene for a good chunk of time. But I've never kind of seen it like that again. And especially with just music in general and live music and in general depreciating over the recent years, which is awful. I've never seen anything like it before. It was really cool and something I was super
Yeah.
proud to be a part of.
Yeah. And I mean, you
Yeah.
release a CD, and I'm here in New Brunswick, ends up
Yeah.
in my record store, and all of a sudden there's like people all over Canada listening to your band, and all of a sudden you're going across the country touring, people know your songs. Like, that must be such a cool feeling.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man. When we started playing music, we were just super. We were young and dumb, and just we were lucky enough to have friends like Gob, who were also super active in the independent punk rock music scene. So we really were lucky that we had them and other bands around us that influenced us.
Mhm.
That really I could kind of look at what they were doing and be like, oh, okay, so you're supposed to just get in the van and go travel across the world, and you go do that, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
okay, well, let's go do that. And yeah, it was an absolute trip. What was really cool, I recently just found a box. I was notorious for not keeping things. I was very transient at that time, and I didn't have a place to keep a lot of things. So, but I did find this one box, and with a whole bunch of like fan mail from the P Against the Wind times, because at that time that's how people would get
Yeah.
to know you, right? They would write a letter, or they'd find our PO box address in the back of the album and send a couple bucks to
Yeah.
have some stickers sent to us. And it was just the coolest thing in the world. Like like all young kids that they just found something that they're like, oh, this is a cool band. I want to interact with them. And it meant that much more because you would actually have this physical thing. You're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
holy shit.
It's
It
true.
was so cool. It was very cool.
Yeah. And kind of going back to the beginnings, I had no idea about this till I was doing a bit of research, but Allison had a tie with Gob, and I don't know if that's how the As Seen on TV compilation became, but can you tell me a bit about that connection and maybe lead up to how that album happened?
Yeah, well, when we met Allison, Tom and Al were seeing each other, and that would be the, that more personal connection with ourselves and Tom. And Tom released on Positive Records, which was his independent label. And I believe the first Gob album they released on the Positive label as well. So at that stage, that was the personal connection, and of course, we just liked each other's music and each other personally and all kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And at that time, when we released As Seen on TV, it's funny. I've been asked a lot about it, about kind of that era, and I hate to, it's so funny. Like, I know a lot of those years were just such a blur. Like, I mean, it was just like
Hmm.
things were happening, and you almost felt like you were just jumping, hanging on to something, and you're just doing everything you could do to just stay on board. So a lot of it's just a blur. It was just like I remember little parts and pieces of that time, but not like I remember, last year.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
a lot of it's very blurry.
Things happening fast, maybe a few drunken
Yeah.
stupors.
Yeah, yeah. Totally.
That's great. Back in '96, Edith Bernie's makes its Much Music debut. Like, that
Yeah.
was YouTube back then. So tell me how big it was to have a video on Much Music.
It was a total trip. Um, God, yeah. When we made it, we made that video. Theo's cousin shot it all for us, and making the video was a lot of fun. If you go back and watch the Edith Bernie's video, there's some live music, and that was at a friend of ours. Their parents amazingly agreed to allow us to have like this home garage show, and it was fucking insane.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
mean, everybody went, and it was just crazy. It was just the craziest thing, but it was so fun. But I remember, I guess he ran out of film because it was actual real life film, and he ran out of it pretty quickly. It's not like we had any budget or any money to invest in this, and then we got just a small amount of footage from it, and of course put it into the video along with all the other stuff. So making the video was a lot of fun, and then it was just like, oh my God, they're like actually playing the video, because I mean, you don't think they're actually going to play the
Yeah.
video. You may, if you're lucky, you might get one play on a West Coast thing,
Yeah.
on Much West.
And they had those like specialty shows like The Wedge and stuff
Yeah,
like that. But
completely. But then they actually played it. Like like they actually played it.
yeah, just in
Like we
just
had
in the
like
regular rotation.
like we had like a really small, like a small rotation, but I mean, it was, damn thing was being played.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And then we would hear, they would use chunks of the audio for other video stuff, like other things that they were promoting. If it was skateboard or snowboarding or something, and then you'd hear a little bit of dum 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 dum, like you'd hear the Edith Bernie's video and the snare, and I remember one day hearing that, I'm like, holy shit, they're actually like using the music for stuff, and I just thought it was so cool. Like, yeah, it was a trip. It's not. It was a totally different thing.
Yeah.
All the Much Music people were incredibly cool to us, though. You start making friends with people on Much West, and TDM, Terry, David Mulligan, all these guys and gals that were there, and I mean, like, they're just the coolest people. And same thing with a lot of the West Coast radio DJs and stuff. We could just call them up in the studio and go, hey, what's up, and
Yeah.
and they'd play your music, and it was very cool, very tightly knit.
Yeah.
The community is rad.
Giving yourself some street cred, having all the Much Music VJs on speed dial, and we made
Check
it.
this out, folks. Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally.
So the Bernie's, is that actually a restaurant?
No, it's interesting. Allison brought it up in practice. I didn't. So we were writing the song, and a lot of times, if I don't come in with lyrics already written, and as most musicians, they'll will have like a lyric melody or something, and then you start blathering words out to kind of fill in the places and kind of fill in the song with words, and then I'll sit down and start writing lyrics. But Allison had a T-shirt on, and it said Bernie's on it, and I believe it was her. I can't remember if it was her mom and dad's restaurant or her uncle's or something along the lines, but it said Bernie's, and then I just started saying "Eat at Bernie's, everyone." Yeah. And then I went home that night, and then just started creating more of kind of a metaphorical sort of story around it, and then it just stuck. Like, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to change it. I think it actually works really well.
Yeah. Have you stayed buds with the guys in Gob over the years?
You know what? When I kind of when I stopped playing music, I almost excommunicated myself from like the music industry and everything for like quite literally almost 20 years. Like, I mean, like, I stopped playing music and I stopped everything. I just completely vacated everything. So, Theo and myself will send DMs so every so often. Tom and I will DM each other on whatever platform that we choose at the time. Gabe, clearly I've probably kept in touch the most with Gabe over the years, but we all, kind of the three of us all have.
Yeah. So back in the 90s, you toured with some pretty awesome bands. What are some memorable tours or maybe some bands you shared the stage with?
Man, we were, again, it was just one of those wacky, crazy things that we just got to play with some wicked bands. And again, it's just like, I was just talking to somebody, we opened up for, we were supporting AFI when they were playing in, I feel like Kelowna or somewhere nearby here. And I couldn't tell you one note that I would have remembered. At that show. It's just like, I know we played it and I know we were there, but I couldn't tell you a damn thing about it. Like, nothing, I do remember actually specifically about that show, which I did think was really cool, was that the guy that was doing merch for AFI at the time, he, I guess, received a demo tape of Another Joe, I don't know, I guess months or the year before, because we did our first shows, our very first shows actually were in like California on a really super painful little tour that we decided to just go out and to California and play shows. And he had received a demo and was trying to hook us up with a show at that time. And I remember he sort of waved me down when I was walking by at this show, and he introduced himself, and he goes, "Hey man, I'm so and so, and I was trying to get we were talking about getting you a show," and I thought that was really cool. But yeah, I remember one band that I thought was the coolest band in the world was No Use for a Name, and what I thought was super dope was we got to play with them out here in locally, and Sly had another Joe sticker on his guitar.
Wow.
And he was playing on Much Music with it, and we had like this lime green and blue sticker, and it said Another Joe, and I just thought it was rad. And I was talking to him, I go, "Hey man, like, thanks a lot for that." He goes, "No, the name's great because it goes with No Use for a Name." So it's sort of like, that sort of thing. I'm like, rad, man, that's totally cool. But we were like, I remember like when we got to do some touring with SNFU more on the East Coast and in Ontario, and that was an absolute, one of the most important things for me personally. Ken was or Chai Pig was just one of the most important frontmen, I believe, in punk rock in general. Like, and it was amazing to be able to, consider him a friend of mine. And after that in Vancouver, and Mark and myself and Rob and myself, and, we all exchanged messages and stuff. Yeah. And they were just absolutely phenomenal. SNFU is just such an important punk rock band. And I can't believe that we got to actually like tour with them and play with them and stuff. It was super rad.
Yeah. And to get to know him like on a different level too. I read his book, and it's actually like just really sad. Like, he had such a hard life, and just
Yeah.
going to see him on tour, on stage, that persona, but like all the stuff that was happening behind the scenes, it's incredible that he was able to do as much as he did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I get it. I think that there is something to be said that for 45 minutes to an hour on a stage, that's the easy part. It's kind of everything else that
Yeah,
revolves around it. That's the tough part. So,
yeah, exactly. So kind of on that notion, stepping away from music for a while, what kind of was the stepping stone to say, you know what, like I miss this, I want to do it again?
to get back into music,
Yeah,
when I stopped playing music, I was in such a in a really bad state, and I was for years, for a good 5 years. I just was having a very difficult time with almost everything personally, and the band was just sort of this other layer of I had just gnarly mental health and gnarly imposter syndrome and gnarly insecurities, and then you're in this band and then you go to a town and everyone's like, hey man, what's going on? This is like, what the fuck is going on? And
yeah,
mentally it was always really, really difficult for me to keep it together. And at that time, you just, we didn't talk about mental health and we didn't talk about these things, and you didn't even fucking talk about it in the band. Like, I mean, it was just sort of like, Jesus, why is John like off, or why is he, Allison used to always
yeah.
joke, she's like, you're the only person I know that you could go in a van and actually hide. And then we would have to, like, when we get gas, like, John, you here? And he's like, yep. Like, wherever I'm like tucked away in a van
Oh,
trying to, get it together.
I
So,
100% get
um,
that. I've been there.
yeah, it was gnarly. So I just got to a point where I'm like, there's bad, I'm thinking bad stuff. So it's like, I think maybe I need to just stop.
Mhm.
And like I said, I just literally stopped. I moved to a whole new city. It was just sort of like I fell off the face of the planet Earth. So with all that being said, um, I mean, I hardly even played a guitar in 20 years. Like, certainly not writing punk rock songs. Uh, and but something just I started writing again punk rock music, and I just, it's been a long time, and um, I'm in a really good place, and you work on this stuff, and now mental health is something you do talk about, and therapy and all
Mhm.
these things, and I've done it all. And there is a sort of something, nothing in me told me, I mean, I didn't have to go play music ever again in my life. It's not like there was
Yeah,
like this crazy demand or anything insane, but it just, I started writing songs, and it was fun. And Ernie, who had recorded he'd recorded some of P Against the Wind, and Crown Doodle Daddy and Plasticine, and he and I have been in touch with each other for a long time now. And I'm like, well, I think maybe I want to record some Another Joe songs. He's like, well, I think I kind of want to be the guy to do that. And I'm like, all right. And the intention was actually never to get Another Joe back together. That was not my intention going into this at all. In fact, the thought of having a band, like a formal band together, was probably borderline paralyzing to think that. But I recorded Ready or Not, and then at the same time, uh, while recording, people of punk rock reached out to me, as they were uh, as in shock as most other people were when they found out Another Joe was playing again.
yeah,
And they asked if P Against the Wind had ever been released again or on anything, and I'm like, no. And he goes, we'd really love to release it on vinyl and whatever. And so through that process of remastering the album, I I had to listen to the album. Like, I haven't listened to P Against the Wind in 100 years, nor any of Another Joe's music. And but when you're remastering it, and I also had the opportunity to do some little edits to clean up some parts, and where I could, um, you get to sort of revisit yourself, or at least for me, I got to revisit myself a little bit through the songs and through the lyrics. And I realized at the end of that, I'm like, holy shit, I think I want to actually play Another Joe music, like, for real, for real.
mhm.
And it was awesome. Like, I was so super super excited actually, and to kind of regroup. And there's no big like crazy plans or anything. It's just like we're just now four people in a room that are sound fucking rad and are having a really great time. And I've literally never in my life had so much fun playing music
Mhm.
ever than we are right now. So I'm super happy that all
Yeah.
happened.
So when you got the notion to kind of get the band back together, did you pick up the phone and just start calling some ex members and maybe tell us a bit about how you were able to get your current lineup and who you have with you?
Yeah. So at first it was a very it wasn't it was definitely a process of thinking about it. Like, I mean, I really had to, I knew that if I was going to play music again, there was going to be a certain amount of commitment, obviously from myself and anybody else. And um I'd have to learn all the goddamn lyrics and how to play guitar, like all these things, and be the live entity.
Hmm.
uh but it pretty much just once it was, it was set in stone. And yep, it was just pick up the phone. Ryan, who plays second guitar now and also sings backup vocals, I reached out to Ryan, and I knew that if we were going to do another Joe again, I wanted a second guitar to fill it up and just to sound bigger. And even back in the day, I wanted to have a second guitar player, but I mean, it was just organizing. It was just a pain in the ass. So the second chance is like, okay, no, I can have a second guitar player. So I've known Ryan forever. Ryan and I have, I know Ryan from way back in the day, and we've also stayed in touch professionally with our businesses together. And he was literally the first and only choice to play guitar with. I really love him more than anything. Allison was a no-brainer. Allison, is at a point in her life as well that she's able to commit time to another Joe, which that was my kind of thing too. We've got kids, we've got all these
Yeah.
things, it's sort of like, all right. So that was a no-brainer, and she's super pumped and is having an awesome time. And then it came down to drums, and if there's anything in another Joe, we always bounced around with drummers. Um, Mario was helping us out at the beginning. Mario plays guitar with the Real Mackenzies, and we know Mario from way back in the day as well.
Hmm.
And but when it came down to it, we knew that we needed someone that could really be committed to another Joe. We wanted like a fourth member. Mario, he has a lot of things going on, so he was really doing us more of a favor than anything. So I reached out to Gabe, and Gabe and I have been friends for 150 years, and clearly, his connection with Brand New Unit from back in the day, and Gob and everybody, he was just a no-brainer, and he's just an absolute perfect fit to another Joe, and he's such a phenomenal drummer. He jokes that I'm his biggest fan as a drummer because I am such a drum nerd, and it's amazing playing with him. He's just a locomotive. So the band is just awesome. Like, I think we're a better band. I could say without a doubt we're a better band than we ever were, ever.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Man, those punk drummers over 40 and 50 trying to keep up with those old school fast punk beats, you got to give it to them.
Yeah, man. I had more conversations with dudes that were like, I don't know if I can keep up.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, I get it. That was one of the main things. But Gabe has absolutely no problem keeping up.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
with Ready or Not, lyrically, did you kind of throw in some of those themes of when you were kind of down and out, some messages of mental health issues, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it a very deep lyrical album for you?
Yeah, like even when you just said that, my face gets tingly. It's like I have a hard time actually even talking about it. I even did an interview not too long ago that, thank Christ, wasn't on video, so we'll see how this goes. And they were asking me some questions about specific songs, and I had to even just stop typing and just calm down a little bit. There's yeah, it's deeply personal. Uh, all of the lyrics that I've ever written. I mean, literally, if you sit there and you just read the lyrics, you're like, Jesus Christ. You know, there's some deep stuff. But with Ready or Not and the songs on it, um, I'm really proud of the lyrical content, and I'm really proud of the songs. And I think that from a perspective of reading something, and as a reader or a listener, you can hear or read and say, wow, this means something, like it's personal. And
Hmm.
I, yeah, it's
Yeah. Well, I mean
it's a
that.
really personal album.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, if your music touches someone, if your music helps somebody, I'm sure there's songs out there that have done that to you. So to kind of be on the other
Yeah,
end and perhaps create music that someone feels and gives them hope, or just kind of makes them realize there's someone else that feels like me. It's such an
yeah,
important thing, and that's what it's all about, really.
yeah. It is. Uh, I think that there's an enormous amount of responsibility as well that goes along with that, because you're touching people in one way or another. Uh, and with even like my voice is breaking right now. Even like there's been a couple people that reached out to me and just on Facebook and DM me asking me about a couple specific songs on the album, and telling me their story and how they connected with it. And that is like, it's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's heavy
Like
stuff.
it's a
Yeah.
really amazing, awesome thing. It's so cool. And this is a person I have never met in my entire life. Like,
Hmm.
and probably never will. Like, I mean, I probably will never meet a couple of these people ever. And it is so amazing that you could write something and go, oh my God, I connected with somebody, and makes you feel realize how similar and close people are ultimately.
100%. We'd love to see you on the East Coast. So you think there'll ever be a time when you kind of make it all the way to the other side of Canada so you could play some shows for us here?
I am beyond hell bent to do. I have a few goals that I'd like to do with another Joe, um, and 100% one of those goals is getting to the East Coast. Anytime that we ever played on the East Coast, the shows were always awesome, and we such great people. And honestly, for some reason, always like even when I went out there for the very first time, I mean, I'd never been to the East Coast of Canada without another Joe. Like I never,
Yeah,
my family didn't date me there or anything like that. But it always reminded me of the West Coast because there's an ocean or whatever, and
yeah.
it feels artistic and creative. And I know that for me, those were always my feelings going there.
Hmm.
And we've had like a lot of people from the East Coast specifically, like, dude, get out here. So we really, really are making an effort to get out there. We're going to make an effort to get it to kind of everywhere. It's just that, man, it's like everything is expensive and everything is
Oh, I know.
kind of more
Touring must be
difficult. Like
crazy now.
it's fucking insane. When you look at just more pragmatic, sort of like, all right, like in order to do this, how is this going to work? Um, and then even out here for BC and Alberta, I mean, like we've had half of both of the provinces on fire in the
Yeah,
last month. So even you almost feel like a dickweed traveling around like, hey guys, let's go have fun. Well, it's
yeah.
just
We'll be back when it's done
it's
burning, kind of thing.
yeah, like I mean it's crazy, but yeah, we definitely want to, and we've been talking with a couple people to get us out your guys' way. So that
Hmm.
is that's in the plan,
That's
100%.
awesome. Well, that's great.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, like, it's funny because for us, it's sort of all just started. Like even Ready or Not was just released a few months ago,
yeah.
but it feels like there's so much has sort of happened but not happened in that time.
Hmm.
With people just it's like, holy shit, another Joe, right? Oh my god, right? So we're kind of getting ramped up for how do we do this and how are we going to basically do this, and but it's in the plan. Yeah, we want to play live. That's why we're doing this. We're not doing it to sit at home. We're doing this because we want to play live. We fucking love playing. So
Yeah. Is it
that's
is it kind of
that's
weird
the
to like play shows where you look in the crowd and you see a bunch of like kids that are probably your kids' age, and you're just like, I
Yeah,
think
dude.
I've seen that kid at my house having orange juice in the morning. Like,
Yeah, we played a show that was kind of more considered our more for like almost like our families. Like you have to consider that for anybody that's in our like especially for Allison and myself, anybody that's in our lives personally, husbands and wives or even ex-wives and ex-husbands or our kids, they they never knew us while we played in a band called Another Joe. um, they weren't even in the scene that when we met these people that became critically important people in our lives, they just heard stories. I know that when I met my now ex-wife, we're very tight,
yeah,
we're very good friends, and the mom to my kids. um, I wouldn't even talk about Another Joe. Like, I mean, she didn't know, I think, for almost a year in our relationship that I even had this thing, this band. It was like a secret. I would just not talk about it. And the only times it got weird was that we would, if we happened to go to a show or happened to go into Vancouver for some reason, odds are somebody would, you'd bump into somebody, go,
yeah,
"Hey man, how's it going?" and start talking to me, and then she'd be like, what's that?"
yeah.
I'm
That
like,
never
"Well,
happens in big cities. It's like nobody knows anybody.
yeah, totally." So, so anyway, we played the show and here, and like my kids were there, Allison's kid was there, our families were there. It was a trip to play with ferocity like Another Joe plays live, and at the same time, my 13-year-old daughter's sitting here with her phone up, proud as ever. And then you have sort of one little layer behind people like between 40 and 50 who are pumped to see Another Joe because that's their band. And then there's sort of this other demographic of like 20 to 25 that they just sort of know they've heard like this thing, this Another Joe thing, and then they come like at this specific show. This gal was here who we think is the coolest shit in the entire world, but she never heard of Another Joe, hadn't heard it. She just happened to go to this punk rock show because she heard there was a show, and she wrote us this fucking message like the length of my arm on Instagram the next day, sort of sharing her excitement that she got to see this band that she'd never heard of, and then she looked into us and she's like, "Holy shit, you're like, like this band from way back then." And it's the neatest thing in the world. It's a fucking trip. Even I went to a show the other night, and people coming up and talking to you about like even like how you even intro this. I remember you guys from back in the day. It's a trip. That's trippy. Like when you're like, "Oh my god, these people remember you from like 20 years ago or 25 years ago," and it's the coolest. It's super cool.
Yeah,
And I didn't even consider it, to be perfectly honest. It was just until it started recurring. I'm like, "Oh, this is really fucking neat." This is
yeah.
really neat, so it's very cool.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for doing this, and I really hope you get that tour on the go, and it'd be fun to see you here. But in the meantime, everyone check out Ready or Not. It really is a great album. I'm loving it, and everyone needs to
Thank you.
go check it out right now.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem.